Hello, everyone. I am Jeremy Geffen, Executive and Artistic Director for Cal Performances, and it is my great pleasure to have with me today the four members of the Danish String Quartet, who are coming to us from a church somewhere in Denmark, and perhaps they will be able to identify that for us momentarily. But to introduce them one by one, I think going left to right, we have Rune, Frederick, Asbjørn, and Frederick.
Yep,
Thank you.
perfect.
Good. Well, you did me a favor by for two of you having the same first name.
Yes, you're welcome.
So we are greatly looking forward to having you at Cal Performances, and you're bringing this project that has been many years in the making. But I wanted to ask you about it first of all, the genesis of the Doppelgänger project, when you thought of it, and why.
Well, the genesis that we have, we've been playing string quartet for a while now. I think actually 20 years this year. So we did a lot of repertoire. But there's a little piece of repertoire that we didn't do so much, and that is the late string quartets by Schubert. And those quartets are, major cornerstones for a string quartet. It's the Geffen, the Maiden, the Rosamunde, these kind of giant pieces of music that people bring to their desert island as the one piece they want to listen to the rest of their life. Great pieces that we really wanted to dig into. And we had sort of a vacuum because last year was the Beethoven year, so we did all the Beethovens a lot, and we felt we needed a new huge project to sort of dig into. So we wanted to investigate these late quartets by Schubert. But then we thought that we wanted to make a little bit more of it than just perform the music by Schubert. So we decided to look for some composers that could sort of reflect on the music by Schubert in different ways. So the project is essential that we have the three last quartets by Schubert. That is the G major, the Rosamunde, and the Death and the Maiden. And then his giant string quintet with two cellos. That is maybe the most legendary piece of chamber music ever written. And then we found four composers to match each of these pieces by Schubert. And that's essentially the project. It's going to roll out over 4 years, one program per year. So one Schubert and one commissioned piece per year. And then at the end of the day, we'll have hopefully some very nice additions to the string quartet repertoire that sort of fits in this storyline that starts from Schubert and moves all the way until today.
Well, it's fantastic that you would do this because as you point out, with the possible exception of Death and the Maiden, the Schubert quartets don't see quite as much play as Beethoven, and I certainly went through a period where I couldn't stop listening to the G major quartet. I think it is one of the most ambitious pieces in the quartet literature. It's so big, and it feels often like he's trying to get more sound than anyone had ever thought the string quartet could possibly make before. He's writing for a full orchestra, but for four players. And I think one of the greatest and most tragic slow movements of all time. But something that I come back to often with Schubert quartets is that they were written by someone who died at 31, and yet they reflect this incredible understanding of human nature, this broad spectrum of emotions. And I was wondering if you could speak for a moment about the emotional and the formal challenges of these pieces, especially in contrast to late Beethoven.
Well, we're playing the G major quite a bit at the moment, and we've been talking about it. It's such a different feeling playing Schubert than anything else, because especially with these huge pieces, it feels like it's another way of experiencing music and performing music. It's not music where where something happens all the time. It's not action packed. It's not a different melody all the time. Most of the time it's the same melody that gets repeated many times, sung in slightly different ways, but the same beautiful melody. Asbjørn actually have been introducing some of the concerts by saying that it's a little bit like singing a lullaby to your kid, and you change it up a little bit all the time, and in the end the kid will hopefully sleep. So the goal with this project is not to get an audience to sleep, obviously, but it's the same kind of you end up in a space where time is different. It's almost like it's timeless. You create this time vacuum, which is a really wonderful space to be in, and it's a space where you're not. I don't think listening to Schubert's music and especially these big pieces, you're not meant as an audience, as part of an audience. You're not meant to, and it's not possible to hear every single note. I don't think that's the point of it. The point of it is to enter this timeless space, and enter a meditative state where thoughts are rolling around, and you end up on the other side, reflected and maybe changed without having noticed everything that went on around you. It's a completely different way of playing music and listening to music, but which is also why it's so absolutely lovely to play, and to play many times. Like we're fortunate enough that we get to play it many times, and each time you end up in a slightly different state, and you notice something else going on that you didn't notice the previous time, which is only possible with deep, rich music.
It's something very beautiful that you've just said, and that this music makes you lose your sense of time. I mean, that I think that's the greatest compliment that can be given to any piece of music, that you don't know how long you've been listening to it, in the best sense. And yes, you absolutely leave a performance of one of these pieces feeling transformed, which is another great compliment. But is there an element of endurance on your part that is different from other works in the repertoire?
Well, that should be you.
That's your.
Yeah, for sure. It is also a struggle, because the scope is just so vast and so big. When I, as the first violin in this piece, arrive at the last movement, I have still 10 pages left. That's an unusual feeling. So it's very physical to play this music. Both first and second movements are not only long and full and rich, but also has a lot of energy and triplets that needs to come out, and it's a challenge physically to play it, and that's probably also why it feels so it feels like this to play the music, and because you use a lot of yourself, you give a lot of yourself into the music, both mentally, musically, but also physically. So it is definitely a challenge to play it.
When you approached the four composers who were involved in this project, did you give them a choice of piece, or did you approach them with one specific quartet? And what were the reactions that you got from the four?
They were all very positive. We were lucky that all of them really liked Schubert's music, so that was a good starting point. The first we asked was Bent Sørensen, and he's writing the piece to sort of match with the G major, the piece that we were just talking about. And when we mentioned it to him, it was at a festival in Norway where he was as well. He was just, "Can I please do the G major? That's my Schubert." And then from that moment, it sort of everything fell into place quite easily. Thomas Adès was not so interested in writing a string quartet, but the idea of writing a string quintet with two cellos was very appealing to him. So he got that one. And then Lotte Venikovsky and Anna Torvaldsdottir, both of them had luckily for us, not the same piece. So Lotte Venikovsky had she was more drawn towards Death and the Maiden, and Anna Torvaldsdottir was more drawn to Rosamunde. So we were very lucky that I mean, I think all of them are telling the truth, that they are quite happy with the particular Schubert world that they were given, because those Schubert pieces, they are really sort of worlds apart. Each of them is quite different. Death and the Maiden is completely different than the G major. It's the same composers. You have some parallels, but the output, the energy level, the level of intensity it's very, very different. So I think the pieces that we commissioned, of course, they will be different because it's different composers. But I also think that each of these composers would compose very differently to match a different Schubert quartet.
This may be not so apparent to many people listening to this interview, but the four composers that you selected were all Northern Europeans, and three of them are from Nordic countries. Although one of them hanging out a little bit to the west in Iceland. And I wanted to ask you about the design there, if that was intentional, or if...
No, it wasn't. We just wanted composers that we really liked. Like that was probably the most important thing to us. We also wanted two female composers and two male composers to at least have that balance happening. But otherwise, it's just composers whose music we adore, and they could have been from Africa or China, but they just happen to come from our part of the world.
Well, as Danes, I assumed you would have run into Bent quite a lot over the years. Have you had history before this?
We've been playing a few of his pieces before, and I think on an individual level, I've played some of his orchestral music, and I think it's a really wonderful match, actually. And now we've been playing it a few times here, and you don't really get to know a piece before you perform it at a concert. You practice it, and you spend so many hours getting to know it, and learning contemporary music often is a little bit like learning a new language, because Bent often is in Bent's music you see triple P, which means as soft as you can, and then afterwards he writes POS, possibile, so as soft as you can, as possible as you can, like soft as possible, and there are these stretches in this piece of music where it's all incredibly soft and slow moving, but still moving, and in a way I don't know if it's conscious or not, but to us it feels like he's creating some of those moments where time is not the same as in Schubert's music, and it's a really wonderful match, actually. And these places have opened up for us during these last performances in a way they couldn't have during rehearsal. I think it's a really wonderful match. I don't know if it's intended or not. We've been talking to him about it, and he didn't especially mention it, but I think they're definitely related in this very comparable way.
His music has a wonderful, well, it's sort of post-romantic, very immediate quality. Although I do remember a performance of a piece of his that had been commissioned for the pianist Leif Ove Ansnes, that was given at Carnegie Hall, and I kept thinking, why is someone singing in the middle of this piece? It seemed like some member of the audience was getting carried away, and then afterwards, Leifove told me that was actually him, that Bent had written in for him to hum. Does he require any, let's say, extended techniques or extra musical effects from you?
Well, we did play his accordion quintet a few years back, and in that piece he actually wrote this humming thing too. So we had to sing in this piece, which is a very nice effect actually, because the human voice is so close also to at least the viola and cello in register. So it's almost like the human voice is hiding a little bit behind the notes of the instruments, and only when you take away the instruments, then you suddenly hear the voice, which is an incredible effect actually. There is no humming in this piece, but we use these enormous sordinos that take away almost all sound, and it's just a very tiny little mosquito sound left, and it's also an amazing effect, especially in big halls, because you can hear it, but it's so soft that you immediately reach everyone's attention. And I think it also, I mean, to me, I mean, all Schubert's music really, to me, feels very immediate and just written on pure inspiration. And it's like he didn't think too much; he just wrote. And this quality, this immediateness gives a very honest expression, and honesty is also revealing. Like it almost feels like we see the naked Schubert, you know. And I think Bent is a little bit like this too. He has these passages in this quartet, which, you know, they are incredibly soft and very naked and vulnerable, and just some places where we play just a few pizzicatos, and the rest of the music is sort of just a silence in between. And this vulnerability is a quality that I directly can link between Bent's music and Schubert's music.
There's also the thing about Bent that he writes everything in hand. I think he's probably one of the only composers left who is actually giving us like a score written in hand, and it looks absolutely amazing. Just his whole approach to aesthetics is just so nice, and you've called him post-romantic, but I think you're right in in that word, because, you know, I mean, there's something incredibly beautiful. There's an incredible beauty in his music also, which is also of course in Schubert's melodies and music. So in many ways we feel that are definitely a lot of similarities between the two.
But that's also why when we met him the first time, when we performed this piece for him, just for him, he hadn't heard it before. He didn't really know how it sounded like. It was only in his head and only in his mind. It's a wonderful feeling working with a composer, and especially with Bent, because the first thing he said, which was really like wonderfully liberating in a way, he said, "Okay, what doesn't work? What do we need to cut?" You know. So he's a very honest person, and he you know, when we first played it through for him, there are a couple of places where we could see that he was thinking, and then he said, "No, it's not you, it's not the way you played. This is bad composing. Let's change this." And then we changed a couple of places around a little bit, and he was happier with it. So it's a wonderful thing working with a piece of music with a composer that's actually alive, because it with him there, he was able to show us that it's okay to change the music. And that's, I think that's something that we often get stuck in playing classical music. We're kind of bound by all these rules that we read a score and oh, it says a dot there. Well, oh, okay, then we need to do it like this, or there's a slur, and oh my God, there's a slur. But if something doesn't work, in this case, we could just change it and he would be happy with that. So I think that approach is something that we can probably learn a lot from in other kinds of music.
I was curious also about the term doppelganger in modern parlance has come to mean something like a twin, or a twin from another parent, someone who is a look-alike. But in Schubert's song, it's something a bit more sinister. In fact, I think if there were a Schubert song that would have been the basis for an episode of The Twilight Zone, Doppelgänger would certainly be it. With which meaning were you approaching this project?
So we had different working titles for the project, but all of those were quite lame. So we were looking for a title that was a little bit more poetic. We didn't just want to call it like the Schubert project or whatever. And then I was reading a research article about Schubert and late Beethoven. And it turns out that the chord progression in the Doppelgänger song is almost identical to the opening of Beethoven's Opus 131, which is one of the most famous string quartets by Beethoven. It's a quite famous chord progression that goes way back to Bach. So the Doppelgänger is sort of a special song in Schubert's output. He composed it a couple of months before he died. And back then in German romantic literature, if you saw your Doppelgänger, you would die within a year. That's what they said. A Doppelgänger wasn't like a cute twin, it was something a little bit evil. So he wrote this song. He did die a couple of months after. And there's this whole story where Schubert wrote his G major quartet at the same time as Beethoven was writing his Opus 131 string quartet within months. So for a string quartet, this moment in history is a quite special moment. Within months, Beethoven and Schubert, they're writing their greatest pieces for string quartet. They're literally kilometers apart, both of them live in Vienna. And it's connected in a way by this Doppelgänger lead that Schubert wrote. In the story and also in the literal harmonies of the music. And then we just thought it's sort of for a string quartet, the Doppelgänger title is a very powerful moment in string quartet history, at least. And then it's also, we don't want these composers to just put up a mirror and show Schubert back. We want them to sort of digest some Schubert and put out something that is somewhat connected to Schubert. Maybe a little bit like a Doppelgänger that is not identical, but it's a different version of an expression, maybe.
Actually, I realize now we were having this conversation in the middle of September of 2021, and this project extends for another couple of years. You've got 4 different composers. How have they all reached out to you already? Do you already have music for some of the pieces, or is Bent's the only piece that has come to you in full form?
Yeah, we actually know nothing about the other pieces. Normally, we didn't commission so many courses before, and we did a couple of times, but they get like a deadline, the composers, then they have to deliver it in due time for us to prepare performance, which is a little bit different depending on which composer it is and when they have time. But I think we'll get the next piece within a couple of months from now, and then we'll sort of get working on that one. We need it a little bit before because often these contemporary pieces, you know, they might be easy, they might be difficult, but it's always a unique language that we have to sort of immerse ourselves into. So it takes more time for us to learn a piece like this than at just another Haydn quartet, where we know the musical language. But so I suppose each year we will get like a little gift basket in the mailbox with a lot of new notes to sort of figure out how to do, and then of course we'll talk to the composers and perform for them, and we don't know the process of the other composers yet, and that's also going to be interesting. We know Thomas Adès, we played his music and we met him, but we never worked with a new piece that he composed also, so it's going to be very interesting for us, this process.
Well, it's a fascinating journey, and we in Berkeley are very lucky to be able to come with you on it.
And thank you for that, by the way.
Yes.
You know, I think this is how one creates the Schubert G majors of the future. You have to have 4 willing musicians who want to undertake a challenge, and you know, learning a string quartet is not like learning a solo piano piece. There's a lot more planning, and there are 4 of you. You have to contribute to the selection and to the rehearsal process. And anyone who's watched a string quartet rehearse knows that it is much more time consuming than practicing on one's own. So I've been fortunate to hear you many times, and every time has been illuminating and fascinating. And so I'm greatly looking forward to these 4 opportunities to get to know you even better.
Thank you so much.
We are
as well.